completely low-tech. They can't do anything.
No, that's fine. It will be.
And you're all techies, I know. And I have the. This is yours.
Yeah, no problem.
You don't have anything. And then I.
And you see, and he will control here. How does that
And this one. And this moves. Oh, okay. I think I can manage this.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Then he has prepared the link. So when you want the link,
Oh,
link 1 and 2.
that's just at the beginning.
And now,
Yeah.
now should start with that.
Starting.
Oh,
Yes, the link is.
that. Now,
Yes, the link is linking.
yeah, it is linked.
Oh, wow. So I begin. I don't need the. Do I need the mic?
I will start.
He will start introducing.
Does it change?
Oh, well accepted. Oh, I'll start to introduce you. 好，各位同学、老师哈，还有线上的学者专家，各位朋友，大家下午好哈。今天就是非常荣幸，也有一个很好的机缘哈。这个我们的那个讲座教授林正国老师说，这个是天上掉下来的礼物啊。因为 Peter Skilling 老师相信大家都蛮熟悉的，他本来是应该就是他接受那个纽约大都会博物馆要来讲这样子的印度佛教跟考古从考古的层面去讲早期的印度佛教那接受这个纽约的大都会博物馆去给演讲然后刚好也可以碰到很多的朋友在美国啦，但是据说现在纽约的疫情升温是吧？然后我们有一些考虑那这次他就不能成行了。但是这个 Skilling 教授有满满的他的这个研究发现要跟我们分享我们叫不吐不快，是不是？然后我们就非常高兴这个亲子的机会的Jennifer 跟我们联系那我们就刚好有这个荣幸机会请到Skilling 老师就。这个决定也比较临时一点所以我们准备有点仓促但是我相信接下来的演讲应该会是蛮精彩的。那简单的介绍一下那个 Skilling 教授，他不只是佛教学者，也是一个佛教文献典籍的这个翻译家精通巴利文、藏文不是巴利文、梵文应该按照顺序藏文这样他的研究领域呢，不只是文献，也有历史，也有哲学，也有艺术考古还有碑铭学那目前是朱拉隆功曼谷的那个朱拉隆功大学的特约教授，也是澳洲悉尼大学印度次大陆研究系的荣誉教授。那之前也在曼谷的法国远东学院的教授。那曾经也是哈佛大学、加州伯克莱大学、牛津大学、悉尼大学，还有日本的创价大学等等的这个访问教授，所以真的是非常荣幸、非常资深。上次我们上次来我们学校大概7、8年前了吧那现在非常高兴能够再见到他。今天讲到的那个题目是从考古的面向来看看。印度的早期的佛教了那看看我们能不能够有一些不同的或者新的对早期印度佛教的认识，如果我们从考古的面向来看。今天当然时间的关系，我们而且我知道大部分人英文都很好了所以我们也不会逐一的翻译那如果有什么我们看重要的 information 我们可能就简单的说明一下，用中文而且好消息是 图片很多，所以图片会很多，图片自己会说话。好，那 let's give a big applause to Dr. Chen and let you start your
Do
talk.
I need to use this? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming. Namo Buddhaya. Now, why do I show this here, Tree and Serpent? We're starting in New York, which is kind of a suburb of India, I think. At present, there is a very wonderful exhibition on early Buddhist art in India called Tree and Serpent. And my presentation today is the PowerPoint that I was in the process of preparing for this seminar of this exhibition. And somehow my trip got interrupted in Taipei for a number of reasons. So I'm happy to give that here. My paper was given by a colleague, Don Lopez, already in New York, but not the PowerPoint, which really requires an oral exposition. So it's called Tree and Serpent. Is there another link? Can you link the other link? But very fortunately, for those in Asia, this exposition will travel to Seoul at the end of December. And we'll be there for, I think it's written here somewhere, till April, middle of April. And I'm not clear on, not every piece shown in New York will go to Seoul. I'm not sure which ones will be there, but certainly there will be some of the most important recent discoveries of ancient Indian art. And it's well worth seeing. It's not so easy to go to New York, I think, but Seoul is, well, I think it's around the corner, more or less. I hope to go. I missed it because I couldn't go. So I hope to see it in Seoul. Okay, then we can go to the PowerPoint, please. Yeah. Archaeology of Buddha fields, early landscapes of Indian Buddhism. So briefly, I don't want to engage in technical or controversial subjects. Buddha fields here I defined as, in my original paper, that the Metropolitan Museum of Art has been transformed by this exhibition into a Buddha field. And then what did I mean? What do I mean by Buddha field? That is in my other paper. Maybe my answer today will be different. But basically, I meant the early Buddhist stupa sites were where early Buddhism happened. That's, to me, there are many talks about that. But early Buddhism happened there, and the stupa sites provided an environment where people could practice Buddhism and aspire to Buddhahood. So that is why, by having a Buddhist exhibition in New York, the Metropolitan became a place of inspiration and contemplation. And it will be till, I think, November, end of November or something. Landscapes of Indian Buddhism is actually a very layered and complex topic. And there are different landscapes. And I think that the traditional literature, in the sense of modern studies, tends to treat Buddhism, treat India as a kind of block with no individuality or variety. But actually, there were many landscapes from the area where the Buddha taught the Ganga Yamuna Valley to the where we'll go today, the Vindhya Plateau, to the Indus Valley, to the Konkan coast on the Sea of Arabia. These are all different landscapes where very different and distinctive types of Buddhism developed and types of Buddhist art and architecture. Should I pause for translation?
好，简单的说，就是这次的演讲啊，就是要在纽约，还有后来也会在那个韩国啊首尔的那个展览有关系。那个展览的主题就是tree 跟 serpent 哈，树跟那个蛇。那因为这样子的展览哈，所以那个 Skilling 教授本来要去纽约演讲。那接下来我们这次的演讲会跟一个概念有关系啦，主要的概念就是佛国或者叫佛域，看中文怎么翻译哈 ，Buddha View。那这里面主要讲的是譬如说跟佛塔研究有关系。那在围绕这个佛塔研究呢，佛教到底发生了什么？人们这些佛教徒他们是怎么样的来修行，甚至于到成佛哈？那这个也跟整个景观有关系。这个景观呢，也包含了地理景观哈，从那个印度河流域，是那个峡谷哈，然后不应该叫峡谷哈，那边有没有峡谷我不知道，不太理。那到人文景观这个都有关系，所以基本上就是从考古的角度来看，这个佛国了哈，到底这边有什么样的精彩的景观啊，包括地理景观跟人文景观。
Yeah, so we'll leave the technical details aside, and what I have been able to do, I'm very fortunate to have been able to travel, maybe starting about 2010 or 12, to travel to many archaeological sites, protected sites, that are not usually accessible with the help of the Archaeological Survey of India, a venerable institution. And then I was in better condition too, and I was able to go to these over hill and over dale to visit many interesting places. So this I will call my Chaitya Vandana, which is an old term for meaning to travel to pay homage to Chaitya or Stupa. Oh, sorry. So let us not behave like tourists, gaping uncomprehending at antique landscapes and ethereal Buddha field, taking selfies amidst uplifting monumental landscapes, downgrading them to trivial backdrops of the voracious self. Let us rather gaze with wild surmise and helpful curiosity and learn to appreciate how Buddhism is an inward turn. So although we're going on looking at pictures, and I'm going on I have gone on external trips to pay homage to Chaityas, basically Buddhism is turning inward. And I would like to take you on an excursion to sites, ancient sites, that await protection, excavation, and sustained research. This was rather with reference to the exposition in New York, or coming in Seoul, which shows recently excavated sites that that have not yet really reached the textbooks. And here I was able to visit sites that are not even protected yet, not even excavated, and they call for sustained research. So this is just a side point, I guess. there's a lot waiting to be done in Indian archaeology. They have the archaeological government organizations, there are archaeologists, but it's like anywhere, these things are not given what we scholars and Buddhists would like to see in terms of support and importance to these sites. Oops. Sorry, hard to operate this thing. So literature. Discovery of India by Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru's discovery of India is a masterpiece. It's a beautifully written book in English, sensitive and sweeping in its all-embracing vision of an inclusive India. I don't know. There is presumably a Chinese translation of this. And
probably no.
I don't know if there is a translation, whether it is well known or not. In English, it is. It's a remarkable book. Nehru wrote this as a political prisoner of the British in a jail with other politicians in the 1940s. And so he didn't have a library, but the other political prisoners were also scholars. And he was able to produce this remarkable book. Then he finished it, gave it to his daughter, Indira, and then he was released from prison and apparently never looked back at it again. She arranged for it to be published, and it became a classic. Now, since this was written, as to say it was published in 1946, it seems, many new things have been discovered up to the sites and artifacts featured in the current Tree and Serpent exhibition in New York. But many things remain to be discovered. Archaeology has barely scratched the surface of many intriguing sites. There is hardly any doubt that numerous discoveries await us. So our study of historical Buddhism is a work in progress and will always be. In 1954, A.L. Basham produced an eloquent account of the wonders of Indian culture that is still inspiring and informative. And it's gone through many editions, including there is a Thai translation. So wondering about these wonders, I do not doubt that numerous wonders await us from future discoveries. Now for the literature we use in English or French, Etienne Lamotte's History of Indian Buddhism is a marvelous textbook, and it's available originally in French, but also in English. And Debala Mitra, Bengali scholar, her Buddhist monuments is a classic study of Buddhist history and archaeology. She was director of the archaeology department, and she excavated places, extraordinarily knowledgeable and dedicated scholar. But much water has flowed down the mighty Ganga River since these classics were written in those years. I find this, you can't just click. The maps and timelines of the history and histories of South Asia, of the history and histories of Southeast Asian religions, and the history and histories of Indian Buddhism and Buddhisms have changed and changed again as years and decades have passed. So we move towards new narratives and towards new storia or historia. As I say, the history of early Indian Buddhism has irrevocably changed in the last 1 or 2 decades. These are the discoveries which are highlighted in the exhibition in New York, and it is still changing. It is no longer possible to write the history of Buddhism or Buddhist art history, Indian art history, or world art history by, for example, referring just to Bahut, Sanchi, Amravati, and Nagarjuna Konda, well-known sites that you'll usually find in the textbooks. Now, there are Panigiri, Kanaganahari, Rajagatta, Pauni, Deorkar, many new sites that need to be included. So basically, unfortunately, I will not have many good maps. I'm not good at making maps, and we need new maps of Indian Buddhist history. The old maps are way out of date. Today, we have to consider many new sites. These include, especially, I'm sorry, also I've lost the bibliography. It should come at the end of this. I'll find it later. There is a bibliography there are published books on these subjects all over India, Bengal and Punjab, Bonn in Maharashtra. Tree and Serpent, TNS, introduces you to Panigiri in Telangana. For inscriptions, see there, Skilling and Vihinabar. And in Karnataka, there are very good works on Kanaganahari. So I can't go into the details, but archaeological study entails the discovery of physical ruins, physical objects, and written objects, inscriptions, and iconographic forms, statues of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, deities, and now kings, and so on. So it's actually a complex field. I'm focusing here on the sites, which are, you'll see, piles of stone and brick, basically. And the inscriptions are very important. These have to be studied by experts, and I refer to some of them here. And I hope the library here is well equipped with these sort of publications.
We'll check.
Some of them, they're mostly published now in India and are reasonably affordable. Some are published in Japan and some in Germany, where they're basically unaffordable. And of course, there are online sources too that have to be used cautiously. Oops. Oh. Now, a site that is not actually included in the exhibition in New York is Rajagatta in Bangalore, or Bangalore district of Karnataka. Here have been unearthed monuments, including an apsidal structure and miniature molded stupas with inserted Ye Dharma inscriptions. This practice was widespread in North India, including Bengal and, Odisha, Odisha, formerly Orissa, but it's rare so far in the south. Also, it's found in Thailand and Malaysia. I guess I should translate.
There's a lot to cover.
Sorry.
No problem. 就基本上刚开始先介绍一下那个关于印度的考古还有它那个文献的研究了哈。那我们早期知道从尼赫鲁的那个什么发掘印度啦，到那个发现的那个奇妙，或是印度奇妙的印度啦等等，一直到今天纽约的那个展览哈 虽然有不少的研究，但是还有非常多的古迹哈需要被保护，也需要学者考古学者去挖掘，然后需要学者之后的研究所以前面基本上是有不少的那个就一直到现代的考古研究哈。那关于那个考古的地方，我们以前比较熟悉的，从以前的那个保护啦，然后到山区，然后那个军人空弹，我们比较知道比较北部一点的地方。那后来还有很多很多地方，我们还是比较不熟悉。那现在在过去的20年，其实就刚刚我们介绍的几张那个投影片，就是过的那个文献，就过去20年，其实有一些发现在什么 Rajagatta 啦、Bangalore District 等等就有新的发现。那基本上就现在可能就是要介绍这些新的发现。
Thank you. So these particularly interested me because I have translated. There are several sutras on this practice, saying that you gain great merit, Brahma merit, from making a small stupa of clay and placing within it a Ye Dharma Hetu Prabhava stanza, which is called the Pratitya Samutpada Gata, the verse of dependent origination. So it's the essence. Also, it's called the Hridaya of dependent origination. And this practice was a ritual practice found all over India, also to some degree in China and Korea, although by the time this became widespread, I think it changed often to be a dharami instead of the Ye Dharma Gata. But anyway, this subject has fascinated me, and it was noticeable that it was not found in the whole of South India, really. And then this one site, not well known at all, Rajagatta, turns out to have dozens or hundreds of such stupas. So by making one stupa and putting the essence of conditioned origination, the heart of the Buddha's teaching, according to Nagarjuna and others, putting that in the stupa and installing it in a bigger stupa would lead to enormous merit. And sometimes it says making one stupa is equivalent to making 100,000 stupas. So this was a very important practice, and it's interesting to have found that it traveled also to the far south of India. Want to translate?
最近发现的一个考古的那个，就是有很多那个小的佛塔，这个小佛塔里面好像是放了那个缘起的寄送那放在那里面，然后这样子你造这样的佛塔，然后就可以得到很多的功德，然后好像造一个小佛塔，就好像造了千百个佛塔那样子的功德。好
Thank you.
那个现场有什么补充可以帮我补充啊？这个大家可以看得到是在Bengal跟那个 Orissa。
Doesn't seem to move.
不会动。有的。
Along the southern routes. As I say, I'm not good at maps, and there are several scholars who have done very, very well. One is Jason Neelis. I'm sorry, I don't have it here. Neelis, who studied the northern routes from Gandhara to Central Asia, primarily. He is now giving a series of lectures at the University of Sydney. I think first lecture maybe this week or next for the coming month. So if you look at the website of the Australian Association of Buddhist Studies or the University of Sydney, you will find Jason's work is extremely good. And there's Pia Brancaccio, who is American, really Italian, and her work on the Western sites and routes is very good. And I recommend one book here out of the many books, which I hope is available in the library. This is a senior archaeologist Bengali in Britain, in Cambridge, at Cambridge. I think most of his or all of his career, and he actually went and sort of walked, investigated all of these routes connecting the sites. Not only this is only the Deccan route. Deccan is Dakshina, Pali Dakhina, the southern route, which actually means routes. It's not just one highway. But he also investigated all of these connections in separate books with other archaeologists. Yeah. Now, I do have a map. One particularly interesting route ran from the Yamuna along the Betwa rivers. I hope you can see them. I can't highlight them. Through Vidisha or Ujjayani to the Narmada River Valley and beyond. Some large stupas, generally described as Mauryan from the Maurya period, around the period of Ashoka, remain to be excavated or even protected. So this is a kind of a key area for me, but this is one of the places I was able to explore, fortunately in a comfortable car. And in those days, I could get out and climb to the site. Now we start with somewhere that is very important. This map shows Musanagar, which is a big mound. And the actual site, are near this loop. You see this loop in the Yamuna River. You can see even on a fairly large scale map, distinctive loop. And on either side, there are two big stupas. Okay. Oh. This is the most important, one of the most important slides. Oh, but it doesn't want to. Okay. We'll start then in the province, the state of UP, Uttar Pradesh, near the early historical period site of Musa Nagar, this huge mound, which is also basically excavated at Qatar and Uma Nagar, which seem to be Shunga period. That means sort of first century BCE. Stupa sites on opposite sides of a loop in the Yamuna River. The few published artifacts are extraordinary, and they remain in the vicinity of the sites, zealously guarded, I hope, by the villagers. And if you've studied any Indian art, this gateway at the top, maybe. Yeah, okay. This resembles the famous Barhut Stupa, which is now in the Indian Museum, Calcutta. And these are some of the pillars from there. Now, these were published in Hindi in this journal, Pragdara, and also in the book by Dilip Chakravarti that I mentioned to you, but otherwise not well known. Now, I requested, okay, these we call Adorst lions, in Hindi, Toranadvarka Parshvastambh, from the same article. This is very early Indian art. This was excavated by the state archaeology. We have national archaeology, and state governments have their own departments These were excavated by the state archaeology. Going to work? No? I don't know. Up or down, it's not moving. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Doesn't matter. This is another important one. Well, okay. You have to remember. Stone stupa slabs. I don't really know how these fit into the architecture. That's the picture I have. But again, this is very early art from, let us say, third to second century BCE. And it's this period they often call aniconic. There are no icons, no images of the Buddha, but images of stupas. And you can see in the niches of the stupas garlands and perhaps relics. These are remarkable. There's nothing like them anywhere else. Okay, so I couldn't visit that site. The director of archaeology said it is, I think it was a 10-kilometer walk through sand dunes by the river. And he could see that I couldn't manage that. And there's no road. And he also implied that the villagers, that the area had dacoits, which are chora, or bandits. That area has been famous, not that particular one, but also in that state. There are these areas with these ravines, and the thieves come out and attack highways or whatever, and then flee into these. So he implied that that was also a risk. Well, actually, I might have taken it. He didn't encourage it, but I could cross the river. I could go to the other site where remarkably, they pulled up, I went with the archaeology, they pulled this out of the thorns, the brambles, lying on the top of a mount. Several of these, and this again is very early Indian art, and it's lying there. It's a beautiful site, as you can see, overlooking the river. And we went with a villager who guided us. And the villagers do protect these sites. But when it comes to armed gangs of antique thieves, it's another question. And what has happened to these now, I don't know. I do hope they are still there, because these are two sites of great importance to Indian art. That was one of the reasons why I put this in the presentation. I didn't give this slideshow, and my colleague who read my paper did not give this slideshow, but I included these few important sites because there were an international group of art historians, plus people from Indian press, Indian government, and other institutions. So I hope the archaeology at that time, well, they have a big problem with budgets and how to handle this. I joke in very bad taste and say that in the British time, they would just send in the troops. Now they can't do that because India is an active democracy, and people can respond to these things. And so often they keep these, they put them in the local temple, fine, and sometimes put them in the wall, concrete, and so on. So I do hope all of these are protected and negotiation and agreements can preserve them and make them available. Anyway, you could translate in, well, I fumbled with this.
这个也很难翻译，有一点点小东西，就是比如像提到有一些他们现在在沿着雅穆纳那个河那个什么流域哈，看到的一些佛塔，是很早的，包括可能是西元前1、2世纪孔雀王朝到顺家王朝啦啊，那这些佛塔有些有一点像跟那个早期的巴护佛塔，那有一些那个斯林教授他现在给我们看到了那个都还没有，也还没出版。然后现在虽然是那个印度有一些考古学家，他们有发现这些东西，但是也没有什么资源哈，政府也没有支持，所以也不知道怎么样去研究处理这些事情。他们现在发现的东西，当然就是给大家看这些考古的资料，因为他们也很早，然后所以希望大家看看，以后有没有什么机会能够看怎么样支持或者是做研究。这些他们找到的，如果有时候不知道怎么处理，也会放到地方的寺院。这些地方如果要去考古，也不是那么容易哈。有除了那个路不好走之外，好像也有一些那个抢匪之类的。
Okay, a brief technical.
Anything?
I'm having trouble with this.
有没有人要 supplement? And installing
with this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's better. Okay, thank you.
然后正好去是看到那个大湖第一个声音，那它在子宫里就是从旁边的一些小树里面把那一块对是塔也是有雕刻的，就给它挖是吧？这个东西就是有边那边，然后虽然刚才也有说的，有一些的那个他们还是会把这些东西放到他们自己的那个要怎么样去保护，但是也有一些就是在外面。虽然一般政府也是会保护这些东西，但是当是有人专业要偷这些考古这个遗产的人的话，那样是不会保护不了的。所以就是他要把那个照片是2010年的时候，现在那个东西还在，也还不知道。
Thank you for 2 learned translations. These sites reveal a hitherto unknown Buddhist presence along the Yamuna River near Musanagar. And this Musanagar, which I say is not really excavated, is a big mound that is an early urban site. And we know that early Buddhist development was connected to the early cities of not only North, but also South India. And it gives early examples of a style, which I've shown in the few pictures, cognate or related to that of Barhut, which is some hundreds of kilometers away to the west. And the study of these artifacts, these objects, may well oblige us to rewrite the history of early Buddhist art and architecture. By this, I mean that the current textbooks usually start with Barhut, followed by Sanchi and other places. And if we have a very similar, and we say Barhut is there in the sort of Eastern India, if we have this very similar culture from central India. This shows that it was more widespread than we knew. This is actually a surprise. And it is disappointing that such sites are scarcely known and remain neglected and unprotected. Attention to and action on sites like these are urgent matters. That is, we can't take any action on that here. But basically, there is the fact, the reality, and I would say potential problem, that when the government does take interest in any country, in sites like this, nowadays, it's often for tourism and for getting money from tourism. And therefore, the site may be protected, but also tourism can bring damage and further ecological and other problems to the site. Now we're going to I'll try to race through these other sites. Tumain, or that's the current name. Often there are two names, even current names, past names, older epigraphic names from inscriptions or from literature. So Tumain is the current name on the map. Tumbawana is on an inscription. This site has been excavated. We know its name from literature, and it was well excavated in 1972-4. And when I went there with the archaeological people who hadn't been there, fortunately, we had a kind of local guide who was a sannyasi, a yogi, who had a great interest, and he helped us. But the villagers don't really know what these sites are in the intervening, 40 or more years. So they would ask, where are the stupa? People don't even know. And they're in the fields there. And however, it's still a very basic agricultural area. And this is one thing that I feel needs to be done, is linking up the site, heritage sites, calling them perhaps heritage corridors, so that people are aware that they're in an archaeological site and that it's connected to other sites. And yes, that can be developed for tourism and pilgrimage, maybe is not great harm. So we were looking for the two main stupas. And we found, for example, this one. This is a large stupa you can see in that mound. Those are my two colleagues from archaeology. I didn't venture out into the fields myself. And so they verified also that the fields, the active agricultural activity, goes right up to the base of the old stupa. So again, this is not protected, not conserved. And this is mentioned actually in Pali literature as a route from central India to the north to Shravasti. This particular site, Tumbawana, I think it's a different name in Pali, is mentioned. So this is a very early Buddhist site. Ujjain in MP or Madhya Pradesh is the ancient city of Ujjayini, a prominent center of culture and trade on the Shipra River on the Mahapatrol and the Avanti in today's Madhya Pradesh. There are several large stupas that are inadequately explored or unexcavated. And my colleague in the neighboring area at Bhopal showed me pictures of these two stupas. I've never heard of them. Ujjain is mentioned in the Pali and other scriptures. It's well known, and it's connected with the legendary history of King Ashoka. And we all sort of run into that, but the textbooks do not show these stupas. And well, you can see the bigger one is big, it's huge. And we archaeologists evaluate the age of stupas by the bricks. And these are particularly large bricks that are called Mauryan, usually, meaning from around the time of Ashoka. And these are just there in this field. Now, this was a very nice visit. You do see that there are electric power lines running through them, but this was a very nice visit. Just over here, actually, the second time I went, I noticed that there are a lot of buildings. And I said, what's that? And they said, that's a new industrial suburb of Ujjain that the government is promoting. That's only actually a few kilometers across these fields. And the survey has, the survey owns maybe up to 10 meters around the stupas. That is not adequate. So there are these kind of problems. So I didn't talk about this. There is another stupa in Ujjain on the river that has a tiny excavation has been made. But now we move to another part of MP. I'm sorry, there's no map to point this out on. Deir Kotar in district Rewa. This was a very exciting discovery of a rather huge stupa made of bricks on this plateau. There is an inscribed pillar, stone pillar, beside the stupa, and that has been edited and discussed by myself and a much more learned scholar, Professor Oscar van Hinuber, and some comments made by Richard Solomon and one of his students about the relation of this site, or this inscription even, to Kosambi, which is just down the bottom of the hill across the river. So it connects up to Kosambi. And Professor van Hinuber connects it to a lineage of disciples starting with the Buddha himself. So, and the inscription is not Ashokan, as some claimed, but it's early post-Ashokan. So it's a very important site. And according to one of my colleagues, why did this pillar, this giant monolithic stone pillar, why is it broken, fallen down? He said when they excavated, they found ash, charcoal in the foundation of the pillar. Oh. And this is one of the ways to bring down a pillar. The quickest way maybe to light a fire at the base. So he attributes it to the vandalism of a certain king, Shunga, the first Shunga king, against the Buddhist tradition and against the preceding Ashokan or Mauryan dynasty. Anyway, that's all controversial, but we do have these inscriptions. These are published in the journal, which you must have from the Research Institute in Japan, Karashima Sensei's journal, which is widely distributed and also available online. So these are bits and pieces that are kept in the storage. Another problem is that what do you do with things when you discover them? And often as in the previous case, the villagers don't let the government cart them away. and there's no museum handy nearby. And maybe there's an intention to create a museum later, and they keep them in storage in the archaeological precinct nearby. So this is an early abacus, the top of a pillar from there. And it's a stupa with a view. It's a splendid view. This is from the platform at the top. And you look out down, actually, to the Ganga River. Another site, Dundigari, is nearby. My colleague A.K. Singh was from that area, and he told us, it was about 4 p.m., we were going back. He said, don't go back, you should go here. And he explained how to get there. This also is scarcely reported anywhere. And you can see on the horizon, the stupa itself. Well, anyway, you can see it. Perched high on the banks of the Naina River, about 3 kilometers downstream from an utterly beautiful, steep waterfall. These are wonderful sights. That is actually the view from beside the stupa. And there are rock paintings on the cliffs below. So we can imagine, I'm been talking about routes. Stupas grew up along trade routes because they catered to the passing merchants. They spiritually catered to their needs by giving blessings to the merchants. And they also did some banking, some commercial activities for the merchants. So, and they offered sakur for the overnight. They could stay there, they could park their caravans and so on. And so you can see here that merchants coming along these valleys, maybe sometimes by boat, we don't know, and you would see this remarkable stupa above. So they are very prominent sites. And these two sites are both connected to the celebrated stupa of Barhut. So we've studied often the monuments in the classical monographs. We study the monuments as isolated examples of a monument or of an art style, but they're all connected in terms of spiritual or, say, pilgrimage connections, maybe also study routes. There would be particular teachers, particular activities at different places. So there, people would go from place to place. And so Barhut we know well, but we don't know these other sites sufficiently well. And since I went to these probably already 10 to 15 years, they're still not really, they haven't appeared prominently in the art historical or Buddhist art historical literature. This is Barhut Stupa today. As you probably know, the sculptures and the inscriptions are all removed to Calcutta by Alexander Cunningham, the great British archaeologist of the time. And he was concerned about the fact that the villagers were recycling many of these monuments. This was before the bottomless thirst of the antique markets took over, but the villagers would use them for doorsteps, construction. So I feel I was lucky to visit Barhut and see the site, although people don't go there because the stupa is basically no more. And the railing, you can see the circle there, carved railing, you go to Calcutta. And I recommend that if people can. Jason Hawkes has studied this and found again that it's a kind of, there is a network of sites around there. It's not isolated. Other Buddhist sites even later Buddhist sites that we don't know about. And this recommended reading, this book, Buddhist Stupas in South Asia by Jason Hawkes and Akira Shimida, is a recommended reading, but I don't have the date there. I'm not sure. Yes, it's a wonderful book by very knowledgeable and sincere people. But this is pre all of the things in the Tree and Serpent exhibition were not yet known or excavated. So the ancient map, the archaeology is changing. We tend to kind of fix these maps in our textbooks, maps from the British period, maps 100 years old. And we don't recognize that all our knowledge changes the landscapes, changes the maps. Panguraria is back in the same state, Madhya Pradesh, but nearer to Sanchi. Another splendid site. You can see the cave you can see the cave in the middle of this hill. And here they discovered a version of Minor Rock Edict 1 of Ashoka on the wall cave, and a separate inscription, which is a bit controversial. There are several versions of it. Also, for inscriptions, we have to entertain the fact that we don't know everything and we cannot interpret them absolutely. And this one has been rather differently interpreted by D.C. Sirkar, a great Indian epigraphist, and by Harry Falk, a great German epigraphist. And I tend to agree with Harry Falk, who interprets it as Piyadasi by name, when he was crown prince, came to this place on a pleasure tour. This is separate from the Minor Rock Edict. And other people, Sirkar had his interpretation. One of my colleagues from Calcutta said Falk, she's very thoughtful, has reinterpreted many inscriptions. She said Falk's interpretation, which I favor, was impossible, and she has her interpretation. So we have to not take a single official version as the only explanation of these questions. We have to be open. Panguraria is a huge stupa complex running up a hill. It looks down on the Narmada River. These are the lower stupas, these are large stupas. And you can see in the middle of the cliff, the actual rock where the inscriptions are. And these are stupas above the inscription running up the hill. I think there's 40 or 50 smaller stupas there with small walls, enclosures. Splendid view. Very fortunately, some sites are protected by Archaeological Survey, and some of these are within forestry land. This area is basically protected by the Department of Forests. So you get these wonderful views. And Panguraria not only has the Ashokan inscription, but the shaft of a stone paracel with a donative inscription in early Brahmi, the earliest Indian script, more or less, a significant site in the history of the order of nuns, the Bhikshuni Sangha, because I guess I don't really say here, but the inscription records a group of nuns making this chhatra, this parasol, which were always donated to protect the stupas. It's a kind of a royal custom, in fact, and to protect the stupa and the relics within, and the Dharmaraja, the Buddha, you offered parasols. And so this is a prestige object. It's a very finely crafted chakra, which would stand above the stupa with the inscribed octagonal pillar. Sorry, I've given you a chance to.
对，刚刚又补充了很多有些地方啊，包括东印度那边，那就是也是一些佛塔，那这些佛塔其实跟我们比较早期的，我们大家比较知道那个三起的那个佛塔，保护那个佛塔，其实他们都有连结的，不是分开的。那这样子的话，其实可以告诉我们，其实在我们教科书上里面所写的佛教的地图啦，早期佛教的地图，或者是那个佛教的发展的时间轴，可能可以可以更新就是说佛教的传播在那个时期比我们想象的更大。那就是有好几个例子在介绍，跟早期的佛塔，那个早期就是包括到阿育王的时候，然后中间有讲到，譬如说像有一些佛塔，我们看到有一些那个石柱的倒下来被破坏哈，那看起来应该是被火烧的。我们知道那个有可能是那个圣家王朝，因为后来是那个婆罗门的王朝嘛，阿育王之后，那他们那个破坏的佛教的证据也可以看得到。然后在这个 Panguraria，我们最后也看到，也有些这个也是很早的，你甚至可以在这边找到阿育王的石柱哈，然后那个上面有一些铭文哈，讲到那个皮亚达西拉加库马罗，就是那个皮亚达西，很可能大家就是像巴利文佛教学者会说这个皮亚达西就是阿育王啊，那阿育王他年轻的时候来过这个地方啊，叫 Panguraria 哈，然后更有趣的是这边有看到那个大的那个伞盖哈，那个伞盖就是比如说保护那个佛塔或是佛的，然后是由比丘尼僧坛的供养哈，这也是蛮有趣的一个，或是蛮重要的一个考古了。
Thank you. So yeah, I'm showing these sites because they are relatively inaccessible. Actually, Panguraria is not far from the north-south highway running from Sanchi, a well-known site. And that could be done probably, I think, in a day trip. So it could be developed. But also the archaeological department is hesitant to make things too easy for large tour groups, which there's a certain logic to that too, because large groups can damage sites. This splendid octagonal pillar and the umbrella or parasol are in the storage. You can see just lying under lock and key. Maybe now they've been placed in the museum, I don't know. But when I went there, I had to get special access to it. Nearby is Talpura, 2 brick-built stupas. I'm not sure about that. I put that myself. I think they might be stone. On a high platform. This is characteristic of Madhya Pradesh, is to have built these platforms. It's another aspect of the Buddhist architecture that we don't always see in the textbooks, is that it involved landscaping. Landscaping, what do you call it, hydrology, irrigation, and the whole sites were well controlled, very scientifically, we could say, to take into account the land, the terrain. So these large stupas are there. Nearby, there are rock shelter paintings. These are very hard to date. Some of them are pre-Buddhist, and some of them we don't know the relation really between the monuments and the painted rock shelters, which is characteristic of the whole region. Every site I've shown you, I think, has rock shelter paintings in the vicinity, as here. So we don't really understand these, and further investigation is needed. So I was lucky to visit these sites, and of course, I myself could benefit from seeing them, and there were not busloads of tourists there taking selfies. Unfortunately, most sites are nowadays interpreted by the tourists as places to take group selfies. They don't even look at the monuments often. They come in a big group, take a selfie, and go to the next place. That's it. So that's one of the unfortunate aspects on tourism. All of these sites have splendid vestige. What's the English word?
Distant?
Vestige? No.
Distant.
Views. Splendid views of the area. Here you see the Narmada River Valley spread out. This is from the stupa, the main stupas, the Ashokan site, going down from Jabalpur to the east to the Arabian Sea in the west. So these sites were all connected. They appear isolated today in relation to modern habitation, urban sites of today, fortunately, but they were all connected on trade, pilgrimage, cultural route. Now, the Arabian Sea brings us to something, again, is not much mentioned in the literature. I think Pia Brancaccio, whom I mentioned, is beginning to do some good work on this. It leads to the Gulf of Kambat. I'm afraid the game doesn't work. Here it is. Okay, Gulf of Kambat. Is that right? No. This Narmada River comes down here. There's the Gulf of Kambat, Saurashtra, the Indus River coming down here, and it leads to the Arabian Sea, a great area of shipping. We often read about Roman coins, Roman artifacts, Roman, what do you call them? Wine carriers for wine found in India. There was a big wine trade from Rome. And the sea is hard to trace, but this is how these things came. Trade, culture, and religion traveled the trackless seas from prehistoric and proto-historic sites. You want to translate?
刚刚其实有讲到一点没有漏掉，就是这些地方其实也有时候也跟他们的那个商业活动有关系啦，那个贸易的路线、商业的活动，刚刚讲的那几个佛塔，还有就是那些路线的连接。那现在就是再往东去，我们可以看到一直要到阿拉伯阿拉伯海那边海吧那有一些看一下，还是有一些考古的发现，看一下还有多什么这边他提到一个塔普尔的那个佛塔的平台好像这边有提到从那个平台还是旁边的东西，也可以让我们知道。其实不只是佛塔的建设啦其实还有包含一些灌溉啦，包括 可以说那种早期的有一点像那种城市规划的东西，都现在还可以看得出那些痕迹哈。然后还有提到像刚刚比较早期也有提到了，像这些古迹，虽然有一些地方政府有可能会重视哈，或者是地方政府会重视，但是他们的重视通常都是为了观光哈。那有些地方观光客可以到，但是呃，就是大家都只是自拍而已哈，没有对那些古迹其实也没有什么太大的兴趣。那这个可能都还是要我们来重视。那这些考古的发现，其实可以让我们对教科书上面所没有提到的那个城市之间或者是商业的连接啦、宗教的连接哈，可以做一些补充那样。
Thank you. Yeah, so at least I have a map here. I should also add briefly that modern politics has not made the study of archaeology easier. The separation, the partition of India and Pakistan means that we cannot easily cross these areas, and we sort of lose the understanding that boats used to go from the mouth of the Indus to Bombay. That was a normal route until 1947. And then further along here, there can be bad relations from time to time between these countries and these areas of Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and so on. Where are they? Here, sorry. So it's unstable or modern this instability and modern conflicts do not make our studies easier. What am I doing? Yeah. So the Arabian Sea takes us to the Buddha of Berenike. I have only these pictures here. I'm not going to go into detail. First, actually, we come to Socotra. Socotra is an island about here at the mouth of the Red Sea. And there, in a deep, deep, deep cave, were discovered Indian inscriptions, early Brahmi inscriptions by mariners, merchants, sailors, including a few sketches of stupas showing Buddhist connections as well. So this was a point on the sea routes from India to the Mediterranean. And also the later inscriptions, early inscriptions could be 2nd to 3rd century AD. Later inscriptions could be 13th, 14th century or a bit earlier. And many of those later inscriptions are in Gujarati, coming from this area of India, showing these trade routes were going on for centuries. And from there, extraordinarily, only within the last year, at Berenike, about here, I think on the Red Sea, has been discovered this large, life-size image of the Buddha. And this is still under analysis, but it's a remarkable Buddha image found within a temple, perhaps a temple of an Egyptian deity, like Isis, and it has a Sanskrit inscription saying that mentioning the name of the donor, and there is debate between 2 or 3 scholars about the identity, about the reading of the inscription. Again, we have to keep our minds open about the reading of the inscription and the identity of the kings, because the first thing I read was this was a Maharaja Philippa. Maharaja Philip was during the reign of this Maharaja Philip. A later scholar says, no, it doesn't actually read Philip. This Maharaja Philip is identified and can date the inscription and the image. So debates go on. And this you can find some quite useful reports on this on the web. There is a Polish-American team studying it, and anything I think produced by them is reliable. Not only this large image, beautiful image in a unique style, there are also one or two smaller broken images and Buddha heads, which show there was Buddhist activity there. It's not just a stray find or a curiosity carried by travelers. Also, it's pretty big. It does point to some activity. Now, was this a merchant's temple for their own blessings, or did it involve local Buddhism? We don't know. In my upcoming book, actually, what's it called? Tough Times. I discuss briefly, or actually I produced a translation by Matthias Salvini of a passage from the commentary on the Kala Chakra Tantra by Pundarika. And in that, he talks about the diversity of languages of Buddhism, and he includes several languages which Salvini and others have related to Arabic languages. And there are other sites along that map, along the coast between Bombay and the Red Sea. There are sites where they have found, not Buddhist, I think, but early Indic artifacts, showing there was this trade, this exchange going on, and a prize object in the exhibition now in New York is a famous female figure from Pompeii in Italy, a totally Indic female figure, which was found in Pompeii. So these connections are there. And part of this connection has to be intellectual. At least I assume that, I propose that. Not only artifactual, not only trade objects. Now, we're over time yet? Do you want to translate?
It's so the talk is scheduled from 2 to 4. You probably you can have maybe half an hour for Q&A.
Between now and 4? Or should I run through the rest?
You can, I think 10 more minutes.
Okay.
其实刚刚讲到了，其实基本上也讲到那个，比如说从印度跨阿拉伯海到那个阿拉伯半岛，像那个也门那边附近的有一些岛屿可以看得到，也就找到一些佛像哈。那当然从另外一边也有一些文物到印度了哈。他看到什么有一些女人的像，是不是有点像从庞贝城过来的样子？所以就是过去的这一条海路哈，它也不仅仅只是看到一些商业的比如说商品哈，不只是商品，它其实有文化、有宗教的东西，甚至于像有些地方，比如说像那些岛屿里面哈，他看到我们找到的这些佛教相关的文物，也许当然有可能只是商人带过去，然后或者是盖一个小庙放在那边用，但它也有可能有地方的佛教在那边建立哈，那这个都还不是很清楚，还需要被研究这样。
So we've been looking before, I'm sorry the map doesn't show, at sites north of the Narmada River, which runs roughly here. And it's a big and important river. And now we will go quickly south of the Narmada. I will show Kasrawad in Madhya Pradesh, Bon and Pauni in Maharashtra. Bon, B-H-O-N, under excavation, is part of a large early historical urban site with a large stupa. This is Narmada. And here the archaeologists have eyes that can see these things. Just as they walk through a site like this, they pick up early fragments of pottery and so on. Khosrawad is an important site, again not visited, excavated in the 1930s. A big stupa and several smaller stupas. Not really protected by its isolation and maybe by the villagers too. This is an artist's idea of how it looked. This is a major site. So the sites I have shown are mostly major. And that we don't know their original names in Sanskrit or Prakrit. And even if we did know, I'm not sure if that would help us much. The potsherds bear early Brahmi inscriptions, which are translated here into, or transcribed here into Devanagari, and they seem to refer to, and they are fragments, though, to Sri Lanka and other sites. And these, again, are kept in the Indore Museum, not indoor, but Indore, and not well known in Indian epigraphy. And the bricks, as I mentioned, are important, and these bricks were compared in size and quality of fabric with Ashokan style or Mauryan style bricks. And it's definitely an early stupa. So sites like this, excavated 100 years ago, still are not really part of our maps of the development of Buddhism and of writing in India. Bonn is an extraordinary place. I have only one picture, has not been a decent report published. This is an early one. This is a large stupa, brick stupa. This is when it was under excavation, but excavation meant a very good archaeologist and a handful of very good students with a tiny budget and a limited period to work. In fact, they dug 2 trenches. I think each trench is maybe 5 meters, or at the most 10 meters. And they found amazing jewels, artifacts that resemble Barhut sculptures, and signs of manufacturing and so on. But that's all they had the capacity to do. And this site is supposed to go underwater when the government builds an irrigation dam. I don't know what's happened since then. And I'm waiting for the excavation by my dear colleagues and not really getting any news. Pauni Stupa in Maharashtra. You can see here, maybe you can see it. Oh, no, not coming. I mean, beneath this white building, you see the white building is on a mound, and this mound is a stupa, an early, very early stupa. You see here. We call this in the technical language encroachment. I mean, building on someone else's land. But Nagpur University could excavate to the degree possible. And this is modern encroachment. It's not an ancient temple. It's 50 years old at the time or something. But once a temple is there, you can't really remove it. That's difficult. This is an important site. There are inscribed fragments of railings and pillars from the post-Ashokan period. So it is a very important and large site. This is in Vidisha, nearer to Sanchi, with a beautiful view. Just fragments. Here you can see, I hope, yeah, you can see these one of the threats to these sites, which have been sleeping peacefully for 2,000 years, is what are called sand mafia. Nowadays, sand has a big value, and companies get it from the rivers or from these hills, and they send in tractors and trucks and take away sand for free, and then they build highways, condominiums, and all of these very important and necessary things. And this is all illegal and sometimes violent. They don't really appreciate officials trying to stop them. And so this is just, you can see the stupa above, and just below, they're there for sand. So how much this will threaten some of these sites. Another site near Sanchi, I would see that you would see sometimes going up, climbing up what seemed to be out of the way place, and then you see big tractor, and that would be people farming sand. So just go quickly through these. A lot has been changed. We have wonderful reports by Cunningham and others. Excellent reports for their time, but a great deal has changed, and much remains to be learned, much to be discovered. And the whirlwind tour, these are areas around the famous stupa of Sanchi, which many tourists and pilgrims do visit. And these names are often different from those used by Cunningham. They are revised to fit existing realities, the villages' names. So this place, Bhojpur Murakud, is a very large stupa site. And you see, what can we learn? I can't go into this in detail. What can we learn about Buddhist practice? Often that is evidence of circumambulation, korwa. And all of these early stupas have the platforms, often with stairways at least 1 quarter, leading up to the platform, where people would do circumambulation of the Buddha's relics. And these platforms that I mentioned earlier are huge. We don't really know what they were for. And they do have a good view. 15 kilometers west of Sanchi is Saptara, a beautiful site. Again, platforms with stairs. These are architectural, consciously architecturally designed. These are the beginnings of, well, you could call it the second urbanization architecture. This is a beautiful view today, fortunately preserved by the forestry department. And Cunningham said this in 1854, "The view up the river is one of the most beautiful I have ever seen in India." Cunningham traveled all over North India, and he notes how beautiful it is. Across that river from where we stand at that site, there is another site you can just see there in the middle, which is unexcavated. They say it's a monastery. They say it's a monastery for nuns, but that is, I think, just a supposition, because it's separate from across the river from the one that they assume was for monks. We don't really know in either case, but maybe. This was a long climb, an hour or so, through this grass. This is not the name used by Cunningham. I'm sorry, I didn't record that here. A beautiful site. And again, you see the splendid view of these places. And we have to rethink a lot about monasticism. How were these places supplied? How did they get water and food? We have the system in Theravada countries of Pindapata, the monks going out for alms with their bowls. Where did they go? And they had to climb down 5 kilometers, sometimes down cliffs, if they did that system. So how are these supplied? There is evidence, of course, in the texts of lay people bringing food to monasteries in India, as is still done in Theravadan countries today too. So this is quite an amazing sight. There too, on the way up this climb, I saw tracks from these sand mafias at work. Bineka, this is hardly in any literature, just tumbled down bricks. Karvai, it's the same. So these were long and I must say quite beautiful climbs over wide valleys and up to these hilltops. These are just there. Here at the bottom, you can see a pillar, carved pillar and other things, and they would be carried in carts like this by, well, this was a leading Indian archaeologist, Bhagwan Lal Indraji, and these are preserved today in a museum in Gwalior. But we often don't have records. Here we have a record of where this came from because Bhagwan Lal was a great scholar. But in many cases, we don't really have proper records of where the things in museums came from. Other sites are mentioned here. Devni Mori in Gujarat, Pauni in Maharashtra, Jagjivanpur, Mogulmari in Bengal, Ratnagiri, Udayagiri, and Lalitagiri in Odisha, and so on. These are all new sites that you don't find in the average textbook. For some of them, we do know the names of the viharas from inscriptions. So there is a great deal to do about recreating this geography of Indian Buddhism. And finally, we should not neglect the far west, Gujarat and Sindh. These caves are in Kutch, Gujarat, not exactly easy to get to. So I couldn't go there yet. And here too, you find these clay ceilings with Yadharma Hetu Prabhava inscriptions. And this is actually in Pakistan, usually known by another name, but Kahu Jodaro. Fortunately, the artifacts from here are in the museum in Mumbai. The Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, formerly Prince of Wales Museum of Western India. And fortunately, from our point of view as scholars, these things were taken there in the British time before the separation of Pakistan. And now this site, the last pictures I saw were very sad because there were big floods in this area of India, of Pakistan, Sindh. And it seems like this site is maybe washed away. I don't know. And there is wonderful art here, wonderful senses of design. So that is the end of our trip, a bit exhausting for me. I think, I hope you have enjoyed the trip, and I guess I can entertain questions, or you could translate first.
好，对，刚刚那个 Skilling 教授刚刚也有讲说，就是今天的那个 talk 也有点像哈，带我们，但我们现在不要讲观光，应该叫做朝圣哈，因为观光客只有自拍而已。那刚刚有移到另外一个河流的流域了哈，那个 Narmada，那个 Narmada 在 Madhya Pradesh，在那个中部，其实也蛮长的，它可以一直流到那个阿拉伯海。那边有很多的地区刚刚就是主要是介绍那边的那些佛塔。那有一些佛塔也是很古老，可以连接到保护的那个艺术时期或者是阿育王的时代的那个佛塔但是他们的现况也不是很好啦，有些古迹你可以刚刚我们有看到一张照片有那个推土机还是挖沙，它主要是挖沙拿去叫那个就是盖房子还是什么那种就是盗沙盗取的。那那有些佛塔我们看到也是看到有那个叫做比较大的平台，然后我们也还不是非常知道除了当然在那个上面可以绕佛塔那还有阶梯那个爬上去，但是那个大那样在佛塔下面的那个大的平台主要做什么，我们也还没有非常的清楚。但至少可以说在上面可以有很好的视野，可以看到河那样子。那有些地方，好像在河的一边，你如果我们是看到是男众的寺院，它有可能在河的另外一边是一个女众的寺院，这个也不确定，但是也有这样子的猜想。那这些寺院，呃，在那个地区的他们是如何的运作？那如何包括托钵啦，是居士带上来的还是怎么样这个都是还是有待我们再去做进一步的考察，因为这些都可以让我们知道，在古代的印度这个佛教是怎么样被实践被 practiced 那当然有很多古迹现在看到的，有一些就是没有保留，然后但也有一些被洪水冲刷掉了等等。所以基本上，这就是那个 Skilling 教授给我们的这个算是古代的印度佛教考古之旅那这些东西可以带给我们一些什么样的对古代佛教的反思？那佛教的历史、佛教的文化，在我们现代的那个课本文献上没有提到的，或者是有提到的。可是我们现在透过这一些考古，我们可能可以有另外一些新的想法、新的面貌、新的发现。但这些都是考古是做了，但是还没有一些进一步的解读、进一步的研究了。基本上这就是那个 Skilling 教授要跟我们分享的。那我们可能有一些时间，看看有没有老师们现场的看看有没有什么样的问题是。
教授很送那个书。
好，等一下我们有一个小小的仪式。现场的我们老师看看有没有什么想问的问题呢？
Thank you very much, Professor Skilling. I have a question about the research side of this. So, I mean, you're presenting, just really going to these sites and seeing the present state of the discovery and excavation, etc. And most of them seem to be inland, obviously Madhya Pradesh to be inland, and made me think of some of the work going on at present with the Electronic Cultural Atlas Initiative led by Professor Lancaster, Berkeley there, because they're doing a lot of work, particularly like mapping and geolocating around the coastline, and then identifying Buddhist and other religious sites, and they're often along these trade routes. But it seems many of them are inland. Do you have any thoughts about how to connect up maybe some of your discoveries and work with them so that we can get this bigger picture of these networks and these webs? Because it seems to me that there's like one of the sort of the background ideas here. Why are they at these places and what are they doing? So I'd just like to hear your thoughts about that, or where you want to take that in terms of networking, connecting it with other research in this area.
Yeah, well, I hope the Indian government is taking this to some degree. All of these, everything I've told you has depended on the Indian experts, the archaeological experts, historians, very kind and active people. And these are reported in journals, in state government reports, and in some national, or I guess that's the word, national reports. So everything is there, sort of in very obscure places. So often I would collect these journals as I traveled. You don't get them in Delhi, you don't get them in those days online or anything. So there is a body of information, and that is, Indian government is beginning to digitize a lot of this information, and they do have a mapping authority and so on. I had no real time to investigate these things, I must say. I went to these places, visited them, talked to colleagues about them, and of the people I mentioned, Pia Brancaccio, who is at Drexel University in Philadelphia. Pia has done very good research on this aspect, and I have discussed this Western Indian Indus Valley route connecting up to the Arabian Sea and so on. And these take multinational cooperations with governments that are not necessarily interested. So it's a difficult task. Many of this cultural mapping is very valuable. In fact, I have not been in touch with the Lancaster's group for a decade or something. I'm not very skilled at using the internet, and often I tend to rely on the print material. But yeah, this needs to be done, and I think I have tried to interest the Pune University in doing something there. This is a related subject of Purna Avadana, a great story of the monk named Purna of the Buddha's time who traveled to Sopara near Mumbai. And Sopara is a stupa existing today with Ashokan inscriptions, actually discovered by Bhagwan Indraji, whom I mentioned. And so I think the story of Purna and Western India needs to be brought out. So I usually approach these from a textual angle, and I sort of hoped to get a group. I don't have the energy now. I'm old and useless. So to inspire a group to study this, because it connects to Maharashtrian Buddhism, the origins of Maharashtrian Buddhism. And Sopara is so close. I mean, it's too close to Bombay. It's easy to drive there, to go there. But on the other hand, the area not next to the stupa yet, that area is popular for condominiums for people working in Mumbai. It's a very quick train ride to central Mumbai. Commuters, but the condo there costs a quarter of what it would cost in Mumbai. So there are these balances of interests. So developing these things, getting the state governments, getting the people interested, that's not really my forte or my business. And usually they think in terms of tourism, of financial return. And that, again, as I say, can be very dangerous to the site. But they're aware of that too, the archaeologists are. So the Indian archaeologists have worked quietly, I think, on these things. And we are using old technologies, we can say, print technologies. And I hope that people will develop these. And Pia Brancaccio, whom I mentioned, Jason Nealis is also very good in this mapping. He has done the northern routes and he is a Gandhari specialist. But he's open and interested to go there. I mean, it's amazing. There's a site which we know from Pali and other texts called Kalyana as a trade city where both went. We know this from Greek sources too, around 2,000 years ago, Kalyana. And that area with that same name is still there. And from Kalyana, you climb up. I can't do it, but there is a steep route to a pass called Namegat, which leads to the Buddhist cave sites of the plateau above. And I could hardly go down far enough to go to the site where there are royal inscriptions of Satavahana dynasty. Again, splendid views, and those who are fit can go up. Harry Falk, whom I mentioned, did climb up. I was astonished. He's not young. I was told that he has some bone problem in his ankle, that he can only climb. He can't go down. So he did it for that reason. I don't know. But so these sites, and that's amazing. And even when I was there, at the top of this pass, a peasant came along carrying brushwood on his head. And I asked my colleague to ask him where he was from. And he said, "Oh, I'm coming from Kalyan." And people still walk up with firewood and simple goods. It's still, if you go by road, you have to go all way around, and farmers and so on, cannot afford it. Some of these things are still active, and it's quite wonderful to be able to explore these sites. And I think more collaboration with universities like Pune or Mumbai would be very valuable, or they are open to collaboration, not to, what is the word, some university programs from some countries want to sort of encroach the site, take over the project, and that they are very cautious about very reasonably. So yeah, there's a lot to do. And I hope people will encourage more technical aspects of it.
好，刚刚那个 Matt 问题，后来讲到旁边去了，主要就是说，因为可能现在那个在高雄佛光山他们也有展览了，就是佛国的那个海线丝路的那个展览哈，那就是主要是印度到南亚、东南亚这一块的这个海线的丝路，佛教的那个传播啊，那个兰卡斯特教授还有一些考古，他们有在做。不是在做，他们更强调一些新媒体的展现，所以你现在可以有那种3D 的感受，你到那边去，然后还可以升上去，还可以有些 3D 那个 virtual 什么那种 new media exhibition，that's what they are doing now。那因为这边刚刚那个 Skilling 教授那个可能是比较内陆哈，除了刚刚有讲到一点点阿拉伯海那个，我也不晓得这两边有没有什么但目前 Skilling 教授是没有跟他们有一些联系了哈。那后面反正讲了很多东西，主要就是感觉上就是我们刚刚这些报告其实也有一些报道，有一些在期刊啦、书啦，或者甚至于印度他们这个国家的是有一些报道了，但是有这些 site， 但是这些跟佛教相关的这些考古或是古迹或是文物都还是没有比较进一步的研究，所以我们对古代印度的佛教的整个面貌从地理面貌到人文的这个面貌或是景观，还是比较停留在以前我们所知道的文献啊。那其实还有很多东西是值得我们再去做研究。有没有小问题？ 刚刚提到那个，我不知道卡里亚呢，像我们在场也有巴利文佛教的学者啊，在经典里面有提到的，他说 Skilling 叫做现在其实还有人哈，一样那个佛教的那个什么就是还在了哈，那还有人继续拿了香去供养还是什么，就是其实这个文化是有延续，但是我们现在的那个书本上是没有看到，不太晓得这些事情。行，啊，you wanna question? Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is something that you going on confused.
First, thank you, Professor Skilling, for a wonderful lecture. This was, in fact, I think you gave a lecture. You gave a similar lecture about 2 years ago, maybe 3, at Pune online also with Mahesh Sir, and he had an archaeology class. If I'm not mistaken, it was a series, more than one lecture. I don't remember clearly. Much of the same thing, but also similarly, kind of just as disheartening in the end, because, and I wanted to ask about 2 things that you mentioned as far as like the future of these investigations and these excavations. One, I mean, it's with the government and the current situation, with these being Buddhist sites in particular. How does that maybe affect the motivation of the government? And also, you speak about encroachment, and I mean, Buddhist sites have a long history with problems with dealing with encroachment from like sort of mainstream religion. And then, so let's say they do develop them as far as with the tourism and so on, and then it becomes, I mean, there's tension, like even at Bodh Gaya, like between, the Hindu pilgrims and then the Buddhist pilgrims who can never outnumber the Hindu pilgrims, and how much these sites are billed as sort of Hindu sites, and how much just these sorts. I know it's kind of like I'm giving a big array of problems and sort of laying them at your feet. But what do you have something you can say about this and these issues, or?
Yeah, well, I can agree. A mess, and sorting it out depends very much on tolerance and goodwill. And I stressed that. I gave a course in Pune about heritage, I think it was, and mentioning several of these problems. So it depends on goodwill and good people in the right positions, which means archaeology. For example, Gujarat had a very good man, Rawat, and he investigated a lot of Buddhist sites. And when he retired as director of archaeology of the state of Gujarat, he has not been replaced. I think now it must be 6 years or more. And he still filled in when some VIP comes and they have to show a site to him, to the VIP, then Dr. Rawat has to do that. So it's a matter of priority. And as you know, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned, the problem of tourism can be involve these religious frictions and so on. So stressing the fact that these are Indian sites, Indian heritage, is very important. But a big problem that I cannot really say much about is community heritage. We do not have Buddhist communities in these areas. The people are later groups of different religions, even from different areas of India, who've moved in, and they don't have a sense. Whereas in Thailand, for example, maybe the people also are not haven't been around so long, but there is a sense that this is their Buddhist heritage, this is their community, and the government can work with that also in Burma or other places. And so the community, not having top down, everything being top down, to have the community involved, but again, that can involve friction like in Bodh Gaya and elsewhere, not only between religions, but between commercial interests and religious sentiments in the sense of cherishing the site. So I was stressing, I hoped in that course, cherishing the sites, teaching, encouraging people to cherish the sites as their own, as part of Indian heritage. And not much can be done if they take the wrong direction, and which I mean would be commercial, blatant commercial exploitation. So yeah, there's plenty of danger. It is, I would say, a mess. And now I should briefly say I'm dealing here with India and largely north central India, but we have new discoveries in Thailand and in Malaysia now. Some very important stupa has been excavated in Kedah near Penang. And there too, there's a balance of how to preserve it properly, how to present it properly in a multicultural environment. I think they're handling it quite well so far. So these are problems that need to be discussed openly and frankly, and commercial interests have to be held back, I think. That's really all I can say. Thank you.
好，反正刚刚的问题基本上就是问，刚刚有提到什么 encroachment 啊，就是对于古迹的侵害或者迫害，或者是我们如何保护，当然是个大哉问啊。那侵害的方式也有很多种，大哉问。那要怎么样来做？当然就是要靠，我想就是 Peter Skilling 教授说，大家就是要靠大家的努力啦，然后比如说这个有没有有愿意保护的人，他有没有权利啦？然后当然我们也知道很多的商业利益，这些就是文物的保护，包括人文的研究啊，能不能够抵抗这个商业的或者是这种经济的利益的潮流啊？这个本来就是一个大问题呢，那就是需要大家的努力。那时间的关系，知道线上还有一些问题，那我们会看一下，那看看给那个教授看看啊，如果他知道的话，也许我们会做一些那个文字上的回复。那我们今天这个演讲就先到这边结束了谢谢我们现场还有线上的那个听众，好，谢谢。接下来现场接下来我们有要
coming with me
现在我们
on this
会
long trip over hill and over dale.
OK 我知道那个Peter 教授Skilling 教授有一些书要来送我们学校等一下我们来看一下是什么东西。我 try to see the gifts， 然后我们也有一些礼物来谢谢Skilling 教授。We will present our gratitude to you first, and then we will, discover your your gift. 我们站在 Should we stand over here?
Okay. If I don't fall down.
Yeah. 这个要关掉吗？
把那个投影转到那个首页。
You want the title page?
我们就完成。
Maybe the talk.
Yeah. 对。
我把那个海报上去。
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So now we know what event that this is.
Yeah.
OK， 这个是我们送给教授的礼物。
Thank you very much.
This is from Connect to Bahu.
Cool.
I'm just kidding.
It's Chenrezi. Thank you very much.
That's our pleasure. Honor. 可以吗？可以吗？
I would say.
那个
这 OK，
这可以吗？
这可以啊，这可以，这可以。
So be sure to get my name so I remember who I am.
有哈。 好，谢谢谢谢。然后我们也代表
当教授拍，我不确定是谁。
So I'm presenting a few books, not on this subject.
这些书是同样的吗？
For the library.
它是一套哈。
This is
a series of
this is a series published by Fragile Palm Leaves in Bangkok. Some Pali texts from Thailand.
那个
So I should present them like this. Can you see?
I'll hold
Okay.
with you.
Yeah. And for those of you who are interested in text, one of them has the bigger one. The most recent one has the proceedings of a week of Pali studies. And it also has I mentioned the site of Devni Mori in Gujarat. It has a new study of an inscription of Paticca Samuppada or Patiti Samuppada in Prakrit, a unique version, plus a short sutra on the four truths of the Noble Ones, also in Prakrit. So these are new. This is about Thai. This has nothing to do with me, but from the Thai National Museum about Buddha images.
Oh, can we open this?
Yes, of course, but it's well wrapped up.
还有线上线上没有，线上不用了吧？没有，我们就大家一起来看看啊，没有什么，我们结束了。
I think you need instruments.
Like Christmas.
Yeah, just stay pasico. Come and see.
Oh, your own
我这个包装应该没什么关系啦哈。
your own hands are sufficient instruments.
Yeah.
That's an exhibition at the National Museum in Bangkok of what they call important Buddha images, selected by
打
several
开来看看这是什么
experts from different periods. And they are very inspiring images,
哦，
beautifully photographed. And there are English
就有诗烂
captions, which is not always the case in the publications from the Thai Fine Arts Department.
我们当场这样诗是对的吗？
In New York and in
这个要谁？庄老师来看吗？
Yeah.
谁看得懂？泰文，我要法国。
I think they explain, but actually one of the early works on Buddhist art by, not Ferguson, but one of the great early British,
Take a seat and we have some chat.
one of the great early Buddhist, early British writers. That means in the 1880s. I think that's the title of his book, because he saw that they didn't know much about Buddhism. And when they examined these sites, they saw pictures of trees, people worshiping trees and serpents. There are a lot of splendid relief carvings of serpents, snakes, whatever you want to call them. So he emphasized this. Of course, I think by that time Buddhism had been discovered, but he emphasized this aspect of the tree and the serpent. So
they would they sort of see it and immediately think of Genesis and the Garden of Eden and the tree of knowledge and the serpent.
no, I don't think so. I don't think at all, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Some of the early British archaeologists were very much influenced, of course, by Christian thought. But in this case, I think it was more the idea of paganism or, sort of pre-biblical or outside the biblical box. That's an interesting question. I didn't really think about that. If you're interested in these things, and certainly I recommend to the library, a very excellent catalog has been published with the exhibition by John Guy, the curator, and selected scholars writing on certain themes. There are essays and very good photographs of each and every piece with sort of thematic reflections. And that is a step forward. These things are not published, it's amazing. Because they are recent discoveries in terms of 10 years, 20 years. And I have been to one of the sites called Panigiri. I was lucky to go there twice and be able to climb the hill. These are wonderful sites. And I hope people can go if any of you have the chance to go to visit these sites. Right now, I have heard that the museum in Mumbai, the Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangrahalaya, has opened a new Buddhist gallery of its treasures of Buddhism. And also in Mumbai, there is another exhibit of early British paintings of the landscapes of India, which include a lot of monuments. So these things, if people have the chance to do study tours or any reason to go passing through or whatever, it is well worth seeing these things. And as I say, at least for me in Bangkok, when the exhibition does come to Korea, that's reasonable. I can manage to get there, I think. And from here, it's even more reasonable to go there, and it will be well displayed in the Seoul National Museum.
Okay, we will arrange a tour to.
Yes, I think so.
I do have we have maybe 5 minutes to chat. 线上应该也差不多结束了嘛，我们这个只是私底下的 chat, but it's okay. I just wanna so these sites you study, do you find anything or trace that can inform us about the origin of Mahayana Buddhism?
Oh, big question. I don't think we found any X marks the spot.
Whoops.
Or anything really about that. And I think these are mostly I call them shared Buddhism, or it's also called what else? Non-sectarian Buddhism. So it's and I think at these sites, I don't know, I'm just an ignorant person. So I think that the all aspects of Buddhist practice were taking place, and some of them could have developed into Mahayana. But there's an enormous problem in terms of the old conceptualization of these things.
Yeah.
And I have written a foreword to a book on the Buddhist caves of Western India, on this aspect, actually. And I think it's fairly decent forward on this very question. But this is a book that still, after 5 years or something, still doesn't appear.
Oh.
I know the editor very well, good friend, but somehow this book just doesn't appear. But the problem is that if you read the old literature and even new literature from India on this, they talk about Hinayana caves and Mahayana caves. And that is based on an old assumption that Mahayana introduced the Buddha image, and Hinayana did not. And this is an ancient misconception. Gregory Chopin wrote an article on this 20 years ago or 30 years ago, maybe, showing that this idea about the introduction of Buddha images is that the images were introduced by Sarvastivada monks and so on. We know from inscriptions. And so this is all fantasy, but that continues. And the British archaeologists started this classification. So no Buddha images, Hinayana. Buddha images, Mahayana. And they still follow this, I'm afraid. And I gave a talk about this in Pune once, and then or twice, and at one point, one of the students said, "But we can't. We have to say this because it's expected on the exam paper. All our teachers say this." And so I think some of these things have to be cleared out. And I think the question itself is not, I mean, what is Mahayana and what are its origins? It's is a big thing in itself. And we do have in Kanheri an Ekadasha Mukha Avalokiteshvara with 11 faces. There's this splendid image there, unique in India, about a little smaller than life size, or maybe it's a small Avalokiteshvara. And but that is 6th, 7th century. That's the origins.
Yeah.
So what are the origins at this site? And there are some essays on that in this Tree and Serpent Catalogue. There are some large, well-formed male figures, kind of in royal attire, I think usually with their head missing. So kings often have their head chopped off. The French did that. I don't think that's the point. So the question is, I think I originally speculated that the one at Panigiri might have been a yaksha.
Oh.
And others have speculated it's a bodhisattva or other deities, because there is a pattern of these large male royal figures found at different sites. And there are examples of that in the exhibition. And that is, well, relatively early, maybe 1st, 2nd century CE. I'm not quite sure. And so there are things like this. But I think that a lot of the practices were shared, and they still are shared, like circumambulation, worship and respect for the relics. And that's what early Buddhism was about. And it's also about punya, about merit. And I think an aspect that is neglected in the study of Mahayana, we talk about, when I learned about Prajna Paramita, and we learned about, of course, Edward Conzi and others, the wisdom school.
Yeah.
And yes, there was wisdom as a key. It's one of the wings.
Yeah.
Panya, Prajna,
Also punya.
But there has been a tendency up to now, I think, amongst Western scholars to ignore punya. And you can see how important it is, even in Prajna Paramita, it's often brought up, comparing the amount of punya you get for different activities.
Yeah, they even sound similar. Punya and prajna.
Yeah, maybe in some Prakrit. So there are many interesting questions from these, and I think to compartmentalize these questions in standard questions we've been asking. Often I think we might have been asking the wrong questions, and there's debates, and so much of Valasanga in the Yogacara Bhumi and so on. This is shared Buddhism. It's kind of Abhidharma. And there are unique Mahayana theories, yes. But where that affects on the ground in the vihara and the liturgy they perform and so on. And many people look at Thai Buddhism and they say, oh, this is not Theravada. They're influenced by Mahayana. And this is a kind of
Yeah.
exaggerated,
那个 Steve Collins 有说。
nitpicking, I guess.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we have over 100 online audience, and they want to thank you for this wonderful, informative, important talk as well.
Oh, thank them for listening.
Skilling，谢谢各位大家，时间的关系，我们也差不多在那边结束了啊。So that concludes the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.